inserting the science into this. I'm just telling you a story. It just turns out that most of our lives are full of incredible science. And if you just sit around and just look at it for a moment.
Welcome to Inspiring Teachers, a show bringing you classroom tips, motivation, and stories from successful educators. Join Tavis Beam and Danny Hogger as they explore the why of teaching.
Welcome to a new edition of Inspiring Teachers. I'm Danny Hogger. Hope you're doing very well. Tavis Beam's on special assignment. Both of us are having a wonderful day, and we'll be together soon for a brand new episode. But today, a very special episode with a friend and scientist, material scientist, engineer, broadcaster, writer at the University College London, Mark Miodownik. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you.
Oh, such a pleasure to talk to you. I've been enthralled by your videos and your content. Your latest book is fantastic about all the wondrous qualities of liquid in the world around us. But what really struck me this afternoon as I was doing a little more research and talking and also recording and watching some videos is your passionate moment watching TV as a child with Steve Austin, and how that transformed your interest in how the body could be rebuilt and anatomy and so many different things. And I had thought to ask you your excitement. I'm like, this is totally genuinely authentic. And so how did you come into teaching the show?
I think, I guess part of it is just that I know that really for most of us, the biggest impact we're going to have on the world is through our students. And I think that I really feel strongly, being a material scientist, that you can see that if you go back to the Stone Age and you look at the way in which civilization has developed, it's the handing down of information that's been the powerful thing. There's a big up all these geniuses who come up with great ideas and invent things. And I'm not saying they're not great people, but the truth is the really powerful thing is that we've managed to hand down the information from generation to generation. So to be part of that seems to me to be really the most important thing.
Do you see it as part of the legacy that you are leaving, a way of which changes will continue to occur because of the learning that's happened from your teaching? I'm particularly passionate about people appreciating material science and materials, because I think they got lost or left out of the equation of a lot of educational programs. They start off very strong, at least in the UK, in the primary school. Everyone's into it. And then at some point, it gets sort of divided up into physics and chemistry and biology. And somehow, the thing that what's amazing about materials is that they join together a lot of these subjects. So engineering comes out of materials, but physics also comes out of materials. And so does chemistry. And they glue it together so that into real life applications. That's the key to me, is that in your life are all these materials, and they're underpinned by chemistry and physics and biology and engineering, but actually the things you touch, the things you see, the things you love, the things you put on your, you clothe yourself with, the things that help you see, these are material objects. And I think that got lost in a sort of reductionist approach, which is that to understand that you need to have a lot of information, and you have to spend decades, looking at physics. And I don't think that's true. I think you can really appreciate the materiality of the world at every level of education. That's really interesting, and I think that's an intriguing and motivating stance to take, that nothing is so deep that we're just scraping the surface. If we really take an intrigue and an inquiry into finding information, that it can be found with some dedication.
Yeah, and also I do challenge this idea that there's a reductionist way of looking at the world, which is that the really important stuff is somehow the smallest stuff. I know in Europe that we're sort of obsessed with sort of finding the Higgs boson, and then taking the universe apart even more to find even smaller particles. And I think I just don't buy that. I'm pretty sure the universe, this is an instinct, is like an onion. You keep unwrapping layers, but actually you won't understand the onion and onionness unless you see the whole and how they all connect. And materials really do the connection, because a material is a whole bunch of energy, and then a whole bunch of electron states, and then a whole bunch of protons and neutrons, and then
and adding it all together, and you get this wonderful stuff that is us. It's the world around us.
Really interesting. So what is it about liquids then that captivated you to explore? And liquid, the delightful and dangerous substances that flow through our lives, which is doing quite well. One of the Financial Times Books of the Year in 2018 and won the Royal Society Science Book Prize. How did that become the area of pursuit for you recently?
I mean, you look around. I think when I was thinking about the floods, for instance, in the Midwest at the moment. I mean, and you look at what the big destructive forces are in the world, and it struck me that liquids really are at the heart of it. And so, in contrast to solid materials, which my previous book was about, and I had the thesis that really was. That was an expression of us, of our civilization, of what we wanted, our desires and dreams. I was asked, well, what's the corollary of that? And I think liquids, in a sense, are the kind of anarchic, mischievous, dangerous substances that do run the world. They are incredibly dangerous, but of course we love them too, and beer and wine and coffee and tea and Coca-Cola. I mean, and so I love that I wanted to explore that weird sort of Jekyll and Hyde nature, I suppose, of liquids.
Okay. Yeah, and you do cover a wide spectrum of different types of liquids and the propensities that they share. And I heard you on KQED here in the Bay Area, on NPR here in the States, and was floored by some of the many, many things, and the little things, the big things. I wonder, since a lot of teachers will be watching this, if maybe we break it by grade level for a moment. What is something you would say if you were visiting a young elementary classroom of 5, 6, 7, 8-year-olds? What are some of the things you would tell them if you were speaking to them, some liquid facts that you feel like would capture their imaginations?
Well, that's a good
Then we
question.
can go maybe to the middle school and then the high school. I know you
Wow.
don't break it
Okay.
down in this
Yeah.
level, so I'm putting you on the spot here. But
Yeah.
I think there was something for everyone in that interview that I
Yeah.
think would be interested in, and people who haven't heard of your book, I think would really get a lot from it.
I mean, I think for young people, elementary school age, what I always show them is I say to them, here's a substance. Is it a liquid or a solid? And I can give them some putty or something like that, holding it in my hand. It looks like a solid. And then I bounce it off the floor, and they're absolutely convinced it's a solid. And then I put it on the table, and over a few minutes, it will flow onto the floor. And I'm like, well, now that's a liquid, right? And try and sort of I try and sort of intrigue them about the fact that things hide themselves as solids, and because they flow very slowly, and that actually is what the earth is doing too underneath their feet, and that explains things like earthquakes and why suddenly you get volcanic eruptions. And I think they do love this idea of playful. It's essentially a definition game. Is this a liquid or is it a solid? And there's loads and loads of examples, one of which of course is the tar on the roads, which is a liquid, although it flows very slowly, and except when the temperature goes up, and then you see it flowing much faster. So I sort of get them to look around the world and say, well, what's a liquid and what's a solid, and how would you define a liquid, and what do they do? So I think that's the starting point.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you get, I think, to the older kids, you're saying, well, what's the difference at a kind of structural level between a liquid and a solid? Like, what's happening inside it to make these behaviors possible? And then we're into chemical bonds, right? And and structure inside a liquid, and the chaotic structure that characterizes liquids, and the ordered structure that characterizes solids mostly, except for glass, which is a sort of anomaly, and that in itself is interesting. And also, like, why it is that liquids are dangerous, or why, and the fact, and that has to do with the fact they can flow on their own. Like, if you put a solid somewhere, it stays there mostly, right? But if you put a liquid somewhere, then it will get up to all sorts of things, flowing and
Right.
going through the floor, and evaporating and then condensing somewhere else. And so they've got life, haven't they, liquids? And where does that come from? Like, how is it that liquids can move about on their own when solids can't? So I'd get them to ask those sort of questions and see if you can come up with answers in the classroom to the dynamism of liquids.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah.
One of the things I really like that I think if you travel to the middle and high school audience, it's really trying to get them to do the same thing that you just described, to look around at the world around you and see. And one of the things that you said during the interview, and I dropped my pen here planning at my teacher desk and thought, you're totally right, was liquid soap, and how that is really not the most efficient form to have in a liquid. Could you just say a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, liquid soap is one of these things where it didn't really exist about 10, 15 years ago, and it suddenly came into our lives. And I just think it's a really bad way of washing your hands, because here's the idea: you squirt it into your hand, and you have a certain amount of it. It's incredibly powerful stuff. You don't need as much as gets squirted
Right.
into your hand for a start.
Right.
If you then put your hand straight under the water, that's it. Goodbye. You ain't seeing that liquid soap, and that's going straight into the environment, and never involved in cleaning you at all. And that's essentially what happens most of the time. If you do take the time to sort of rub your hands together before you put it under the water, you're still losing most of the liquid soap as soon as you rinse them off.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, we live in a time where we should be really environmentally careful, and here we have a product which is based on the idea of selling more of it, not selling cleanliness,
Right.
selling more of the liquid. And that just is such a it's just not a good way to do it. We've moved away, of course, from solid soap, and I know that some people like it. I love it still. I like the feeling of it in my hand. I like that kind of, it's like a handshake, right? It's sort of very affirming.
Yes.
I understand why some people don't like it, because they think, well, in a public situation, I don't want to touch someone else's soap.
Mm-hmm.
But then the answer to me, and I think we really as a society need to move towards this, is foam. Because actually you need a very small amount of detergent to clean your hands, and
Mm-hmm.
foam delivers that. And so foam dispensers, which I've seen in America actually, you know, I'm convinced from an environmental perspective and from an economic perspective,
Mm-hmm.
people's own cost of it, because it's a tiny amount, is the way forward.
Wonderful. Thank you for breaking that down for me and for all of our listeners. I laughed. I just thought that I had never occurred to me before to look and really look at what I'm doing every single day, all these different choices that we make. What was your favorite thing that you learned or wrote and researched and prepared with this book in particular? What did you really enjoy as far as the process? Because there's a lot of great stuff. And I just wonder if there's a part that you really like, this is great. What I'm doing right now is
Well, I don't know if I ever really feel like that. I feel very most of the time when I'm writing and thinking and speaking to you right now, I'm not. But I, I set myself a task in this book, which I hope I achieved to some level of writing about a journey that we all take, most of us anyway, which is to get on an aircraft. And actually all the liquids you meet upon that, from takeoff all the way to landing, and how much you rely on them all, and how much enjoyment you get and how much danger you get from them, and to do it in a way that is sort of is a journey. It doesn't feel like I'm kind of artificially inserting the science into this. I'm just telling you a story. It just turns out that most of our lives are full of incredible science, and if you just sit around and just look at it for a moment. So the book really is kind of trying to open people's eyes. And the one that I really enjoyed getting in there, because I think it's sort of invisible, is that the plane is glued together and the glue is a liquid. And, you know, the idea that we're sitting on these planes glued together is sort of terrifying. And it's also amazing because they work so well. And glues, I mean, I really did think this right in the chapter. Man, there's a whole book here. There's a whole book on glues. I can't do this justice, actually. And I got a bit bogged down in the end because I wanted to cram loads of the great stuff in there. And it was really hard to take it out, actually. I wanted to keep it lighter. But someone should write a great book about glues.
Well, there's an invitation and a call to action if I've ever heard one. What I want to compliment you on here, and the reason that I reached out, I'm so grateful you'd give us some time to talk about is, the book is available now. We'll put the links on the screen. Liquid Rules, The Delightful and Dangerous Substances That Flow Through Our Lives. It's the #1 seller in applied physics on Amazon. And what I like that you've done here is exactly what you said. You've made it a conversation of our life and shared content together in the same way that a comedy podcast does, or a great song from an artist that you enjoy that connects. And that's always, I went up through radio broadcasting before I was teaching, and my favorite stories were ones that everyone could think about and share and experience and know the scenario and the setting of a story that I've been there, I've felt that. And there's so much in this book that does that. And I would love to see even more science writing like that, that can be held and enjoyed by a wide variety of audiences, because I think we're losing a bit of breadth in the consumption that we have. And maybe that's in a California and American perspective as well. We get busy with our lives and we don't stop and look around and ask questions of the things in front of us. And that's something I want my students to do. So I thank you very much for putting that into a form that brings that experience to such a wide variety of people.
Well, I thank you, and if it inspires other people to tell those stories, and your teachers who are listening and watching this, that would be my hope. The history of humans is handing down stories about the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And here's one I'm handing to everyone, and please use it.
Fantastic. Well, Mark, thank you so much for being a guest with us. I encourage everyone to go check out the books on Amazon, and even more content, lessons, research, and teaching at markmiodownik.net. And we'll put that link up on the screen. We thank you so much for joining us today on Inspiring Teachers.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks very much.
All right. And for everyone else, the links are on the screen. We'll see you on our next week's edition. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And we are grateful for you watching. Go out and impact the world with your teaching questions and bring something from this liquid story fluidly into your classroom. Thanks so much, and class dismissed.